Hi, and welcome to another fine edition of On the Spot. My name is Ronnie Wiley. To my left is Lynette Eklund. Lynette, thank you. You are on the spot, and we have so much to talk about before the show. We probably did a show and a half before the show, so we may have a part 2, 3, and 4 for you, I tell you. But let's start off by talking about this little bear we got here. What's his name? Or is it a boy?
It's a boy.
It is? Okay.
But actually, he doesn't have a name except I just call him Happy Bear.
Happy Bear. He looks happy.
He ended up being happy because I had made a head mount to go to conventions with me when I'm doing interviews and stuff, and I'd made a werewolf. And a lot of people were in love with the werewolf, but they said, ooh, but that's too scary. I wouldn't hang it on my wall. So I thought, okay, this time I'll make something that is absolutely not threatening at all. So I essentially brought Winnie the Pooh to life. Yeah,
well, that's true. And it's a beautiful version of Winnie the Pooh. He very looks at, although he has the vicious teeth. Now, tell me what Happy Bear is made of.
He's actually the same sheet foam that you use in motorcycle helmets.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He's sheet foam. This is a wig blank. The material, it's the same fur that's used like if you're doing the gorillas for the films and that kind of stuff. And it comes on a stretchy backing, like a wig form, but you buy it by the square foot, and it's $45 a square foot for this stuff, which is part of the reason when you're talking about budgeting films, and you're talking about entire man-covered suits, you're thousands and thousands of dollars just to get the fur for those things.
Wow, that's amazing.
So.
And teeth, I mean, these look, like I said, these look vicious and real.
I cheated on him, and these are actually taxidermy bear teeth, but I painted the eyes myself. They were just clear blanks.
Oh,
so they're acrylic spheres I painted from behind.
Really? That looks very detailed.
He's just sheet foam and wig hair, and
well, he looks nice.
So because a lot of people, they assume that since I do this stuff, I sculpt.
Right.
And I'm lousy with clay. I am not a sculptor at all, but I sculpt with foam. Oh. So whether I carve it or whether I pattern it, and or whatever, but anything that I do is based out of foam of some form.
You're a Fayette County girl.
Now, I was born in Muncie.
Okay, born in Muncie. What brought you down here?
Well, after living in L.A., we wanted to raise the kids out of L.A., and we wanted them to be by family, and my family's still here. My grandfather was the math teacher for 35 years in the school system. Wow. So, and my uncle, a lot of you know Mike Sparks, who was out at the auto body at the Trade Center and was chairman of the Bicentennial Committee and that sort of stuff. So a lot of people are aware of him. But so I just have a lot of family in this region, so that brought us back here. Wow.
So obviously this is not your first bear of any kind, and if you go to imdb.com, type in Lynette Eklund, you'll see her massive list of credits. As a little girl growing up in Muncie before you went out to L.A., what got you involved in this makeup, this craft, the scary stuff, the fun stuff?
Well, the long and the short of it is, when I was growing up, I loved Fred Astaire musicals. I was hooked. Anything Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, I was there. So I decided when I was young, I was going to go to Hollywood and work for the movies, but I, at the time, thought I would be a Bugsby Berkeley dancer. Oh, wow. Okay. Not realizing that those people were dead, It's like they're not doing those films anymore. So when I got old enough to realize that, I decided I needed something else to do. So I went and got a degree in fashion design because I liked doing arts and crafts, and I was doing puppets out of styrofoam balls and that sort of stuff. But I didn't know that that wasn't a career. There wasn't the internet advantage that you have now and all that. So I thought that for an arts and craft person, the closest I would get is if I went out there and did beadwork or armor and that sort of thing. So with a degree in fashion design, I went west and took a shot at it, and the first people I met were monster makers. Well, when I realized that you could make a living doing this, I did a 180 at the moment and never did pursue the costuming end of it and went straight into the effects industry and just never looked back.
And what intrigued you about it was it the people that you met, their type of personalities, or just the work itself?
No, well, both. I mean, I loved the old Hammer Mummy movies, so I loved monster movies.
Right, sure.
But again, it doesn't dawn on you that those, they're not real, but people don't make a living doing that, because there was no concept of how it was built. But when I met monster makers, they were my people, it was a very laid back, very fraternal type of industry. So everybody was very informal, very casual, very friend oriented. So because the whole industry out there for the effects industry is freelancers. So you get hired on a job and you bring your friends in, and then they get hired on a job and bring their friends in. So this time you're the boss, next time they're the boss. So everybody, everybody kind of kept their egos in check
right.
and friendly because each one of you could
Had
help
a
the
chance.
other
Right,
one,
exactly.
you know.
Right.
So the whole saying that you always heard, oh, if you're mean, you'll never work in this industry
Right.
again. But in the effects industry, that could happen because
Right.
it was such a camaraderie atmosphere.
Right.
Most of the films, a lot of the effects on major films were done in garages and
Right.
apartment bedrooms and in
Before
living room
CGI.
floors and so, you know, you would basically, you know, for moonlighting projects on small things, like when I worked on Beetlejuice, that was done in my bedroom. And when we went to film parts of the scenes, we would all rendezvous at this storage unit in the middle of the night after we had finished our job in the day shops.
Right.
And we'd order pizza and show up in pajamas and shoot in the night for a few hours, and then go home and go to bed and get up and go to work the next day. Because it was just, you know, you were hanging out with your friends.
Right.
You just
right.
happened to be working on Beetlejuice at the time.
Yeah,
but
I just happened to be working on Beetlejuice.
But that was.
Yeah.
That's the way it
right.
was. It was that laid back.
And I think there's a Beetlejuice 2 coming out. I think there's been a rumor. Who knows? But
There's
that's
been
going on
rumors
for,
for
30
a couple of years. Michael
Yeah.
Keaton said he's willing to do it if they come up with it. Tim Burton would like to do it.
Right. Oh, it'd be great.
He would be great.
Fantastic movie. Fantastic movie.
But that's been a rumor for a couple of years.
Yeah,
so.
you talk about monster makers. We were talking about before we shot. My favorite King Kong '76 was my. I didn't realize that was not when I was watching as a kid. I thought that was a real monkey that they shot, and then the big scenes they had the mechanic,
right.
you know, the robotic. But I thought the close-ups was real, but it's not. It was Rick Baker. Was he actually the one in it?
He was in the suit. Yeah,
okay, he was in the suit.
Yes.
But and then Rick Baker, of course, went on to American Werewolf in London, which has the greatest werewolf
yeah.
scene ever. Which, of course, then he went to Thriller. Michael Jackson did all that. It's amazing what you can do with the effects of making the ears go up, the face go out. Did you ever meet Rick? Was he?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that's the people that I met. I had only lived out in LA for like 2 days, and my only connection was to a comic book illustrator that happened to have a brother where I had made a costume for his brother in Houston, and so he said, well, a friend of mine's having a party this weekend. You should go to it. You might make some connections, but at the very least make some friends. Well, I went to this apartment building, and it was just this 2-bedroom apartment with a courtyard, kind of one of these old apartment buildings with just a few units in it. And it was Rick Baker's crew. It was one of his crew that was throwing the party. And so that they had opened up the apartment, the courthouse, and the landlord had allowed him to change one of the two-car garages into a shop. So parts of Thriller were done in this apartment garage.
Oh, wow.
But that was the crew that I met, was the Thriller crew, and that Thriller was only, I don't know, a year old maybe when I went out there and met them. So it was like, yeah, when I met that crew and saw the fun they were having, I had to be a part of it.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. So, I mean, as a little kid, you're thinking of fashion, and then all of a sudden your career took and I wouldn't say 180, but a different turn, an unexpected fun turn that led you to where you got to meet Rick Baker and work on fabulous shows. Now, was there any plan when you were out there that, hey, I want to come back here someday? Or were you?
No, you know, everybody, when you grow up in a small town, you think, I'm going to run away and I'm never coming back to this again.
We've heard that many times.
Oh, yeah. And I had all these images of living in this apartment with the chrome and the whole, you know. And then after you get out there and you're in it, the thing I got homesick the most for while I was living out there was the color green and clouds. Because their green is not Kentucky bluegrass green. It's kind of an olive drab, and then the clouds, they don't have clouds. It's a desert. So to sit out and just watch the fluffy clouds or the sunsets on the clouds, you don't have that out there. And eventually I just started kind of missing that. And then I married a guy who was born and raised in the San Fernando Valley. So I assumed that meant that I was going to be permanent. Yeah, because he lived 4 miles from his parents in the valley. And he was the one that started saying he wasn't sure he wanted to raise our kids in town. We had 2 boys at that time, and they were only 2 years old and 1 year old when we moved back here.
Oh, wow.
But we bought an abandoned farm from Mike Sparks, from my uncle. He had been farming the land, but the house was so derelict that the insurance company would not insure it until we moved into it to prove it was habitable.
Never heard of that, but hey, why not?
It was that far gone when we got it. But
and you guys did a lot of work on it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So creating a happy bear or revitalizing the house, which one? Yes,
it's a little bit of everything.
A little bit of everything. Yeah. So again, you're out there in California. You're missing the clouds. But you know that if I go back here, there's not many opportunities to be able to create monsters. So, was there like, okay, this is the end of it? I'll never be able to do this again?
No, not really, because by then I had worked for so many different shops in so many different levels, and they were used to farming things out to me at home.
Right.
So, it was a little creative to get some of them going at first, and I still am working now on a smaller level because obviously they're not going to ship me the Raptor from, to finish up here.
Right.
But I fly out there a couple of times a year to work still, and then I have a shop here, and they're still farming out to me with the internet, Skype, digital photography. The Federal Express man knows me well. He's at my house every 3 days.
Jack?
Picking up or dropping off, so it works, and so I always have something going on, even with Crazy Acres with the haunted maze and that kind of stuff. But yeah, now I wanted to mention with the fashion design degree, I wasn't ever really interested in doing fashion. I just knew I needed to have a skill.
Right.
But when I went out there, this is still using the skills that I learned from fashion design. That degree allowed me to climb the ladder very, very quickly because I went in there as skilled labor. Now, most people out there don't have a degree. They don't care if you have a degree. They want to know if you have the skills.
Right.
So they didn't care how I got the skills. The fact is I had it.
Right. Well, you're talking about fashion design, and then, of course, it's makeup design. There's design in that.
And that's a different field.
Right. But I'm just saying, with the fact that you have designs and stuff, we're going to be showing lots of pictures, probably throughout the rest of the show, of various things that you've done throughout your career. Yeah. Do you have anything that stands out to where this is my most favorite work that I've ever done, besides Happy Bear? We love him. We don't want to hurt his feelings.
It kind of varies. It depends on in what sense. I mean,
okay.
Well, Teddy over here.
Yeah, Teddy Ruxpin. I love him.
Now, this goes to the fashion design degree because when I first went out to LA, he was my first job that really broke me into the industry. Ken Forsey was in the process of creating Teddy Ruxpin. Yeah. And so I went over there, and because I had a degree in fashion design, I was the one that was helping with the prototyping and doing the manufacture patterns that went to the Orient for his production.
Right.
So, and while I was there, I met a lot of people in the film industry that came in as freelancers. So he's kind of a pride and joy because he's become such an icon for kids.
I mean, yeah.
He was in the top 10 selling for 3 years in a row. He became the spokesperson for missing and exploited children.
Right.
And so he was a big thing that made me me.
I was going to say, you had something to do with Teddy.
Yes. But then also, if you're talking about film reputation, then you have to go to the Raptors for Lost World and Jurassic Park 3.
That's amazing.
So it's like working with Steven Spielberg and seeing the Raptors, and they were nominated for Oscars. And all, I mean, you can't ignore that.
Right. You've met so many wonderful people. We talk about Steven Spielberg. Mm-hmm. How is it working with him?
Fast.
Yeah.
He's a great guy to work with, and he knows exactly what he wants the minute he walks onto the set. And you get 3 shots to get it right, or he's going to film something else, and you either have to fix it, or it's going to CG, or he'll rewrite the script. But he's not.
Wow.
He was very family oriented, so he was not big on a lot of overtime, which was rare in the industry. Usually a film day would be 15, 16 hours. Right. He wanted them to stay about 10 hours. So he was adamant that here's my storyboard list, here's what we're shooting, we're going home on time, we're going to have a life, I have kids.
Right.
And so, but you had to think fast and be very, very prepared because he wasn't going to have overtime, so it had to be efficient.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So we had an incident with the Raptor, one of the Raptors, when the scene in Lost World when Jeff Goldblum's daughter, who was a gymnast in the thing, and she flips around this bar and she kicks one of the Raptors, and he lands and he impales himself, and that's how he dies. Well, when we laid him over on his side, he sprung a hydraulic leak. Well, hydraulic fluid completely deteriorates, within minutes, deteriorates the foam latex of the Raptor. So he shorted out, and he was completely destroyed. He looked like mashed potatoes on one side. And Steven was over on the other set, this other soundstage next door, filming another scene, and when he finished that, he was coming to ours. And we know that there's not going to be much wiggle room in this.
Right.
So we had one guy running back and forth to check and see how they were doing for timing, and meanwhile, we're trying to cut this Raptor open, get the hose fixed, get him running again, and then stippled grease paint makeup on this Raptor to fix his face enough that he could do his death scene. So when you see the movie, that Raptor amazing. Really is dying.
Yeah, that's you know, I watched that movie. That came out in, I think, '97, and I remember watching that movie and had no idea that somebody from Connorsville. Well, at the time we weren't living in Connorsville, but
not yet. But shortly thereafter.
Shortly thereafter. That's unbelievable. That is amazing. And you talk about, see, we talked about the hair, the wig, you know, the painting. When I think of you doing stuff like this, I don't think of hypoderm or the fluid that you're talking about, all the mechanical. Yeah. So you got to be kind of mechanical and all that stuff as well.
Yeah. Now everything is done as a team effort, as I've mentioned. So there are mechanics, there's electronics, there's sculptors, mold makers, painters. I mean, it's a very cooperative effort. I'm used to working as a team. There's some things I've done completely alone, solo projects, but most of the industry, it's teamwork. Yeah. And so I don't understand. I have a problem sometimes with people who are trying to be, you know, micromanagers.
Right.
Because I'm used to, this is your part, this is your part, everybody collaborates and but you do have to know enough about each of the different departments, mold making, mechanics, etc., to be able to communicate with these other departments
to make it
so that you can understand what each other's needs to get the thing to come together. So it's very heavy in communication for these teams because you're not necessarily even building in the same room or even in the same building.
So things should come together in one final. Yes. Now you talked about the time frame of like Spielberg. You know, everything's boom, 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 boom. I'm sure that has to be with you guys as well. And since you are working in different areas, communication's got to be key.
And especially, you know, the fabrication, the figure finishing and fabrication end of it that I do usually ends up with the least amount of time because if the mechanics start running into trouble, then they just have to keep going till they get it. There's no reason to put the skin on a robot that isn't working. Right. So they keep using the time. Then the electronics use the time. Then the programmers use the time. And by the time it gets to the fabrication department, your 3 weeks has turned into 1.
Yeah.
You know, and it's going to set, so you have to be done. So that's when the hours would get very long. Wow. And more than once, I slept at the shop. I would just I'd pull out some foam, pull out some extra fabric, make a bed, and just stay in the shop because I didn't want to lose the sleep time driving home because time was of the essence. You know?
And then you come home, have to wear a name tag so your husband knows who you are, right? I see here Ghost, Michael Jackson video, Ghost for Michael Jackson video, working with him had to be a thrill.
Yeah, a thriller?
Oh, I didn't even catch that.
Shame on you.
Yeah, I didn't even catch that. So working with him had to be great.
Yes, he's a very quiet guy. Well, was, unfortunately. He was very quiet, very nice, very gentle. I have to say this, the rumors you hear about him horrify me. I can't imagine him ever misbehaving in the way that the rumors say.
Sure.
To the point where his crew, when they were going on tour, took their family with them. He did not want to break up families for these tours. They brought their children on the tours with them. Now, if you were working for somebody that you thought had a bad angle, would you bring your kids?
Right, yeah, that's true.
You know?
Yeah. Right.
But so it was like a family circus going on these tours because he would take family with them and stuff. But he was very nice. He wasn't the least bit of an ego to deal with one-on-one.
Right.
You know, a lot of the impression people get from him was more because he had to be so protected because he would get so utterly mobbed in the public.
Wow.
Now, when he was on Ghost, one of the things I did for him is I turned him into basically a fat white man. You know, because he was the mayor of this town, and he was also the ghoul. So I did the ghoul, and then part of the fat suit turned him into the white man. Well, when he was dressed as the mayor, he was so excited because at lunch he was able to go out in a car with his mom and ride around with the car windows down.
Nobody knew who he was.
And his arm out. And that was the first time that he had ridden around with his car windows down in something like 8 years.
Wow.
Because people would mob the cars. He could not even feel breeze on his face without getting mobbed.
Wow.
So he was basically imprisoned by the public.
Yeah.
So yes, he was kind of an odd duck, but you know, if you never get socialization from the time you're 8 years old,
yeah,
your social skills are going to lack a little.
No, not at all. We were sharing a funny story about you worked on the Flintstones.
Yeah.
With the live animation with John Goodman as Fred Flintstone. You worked with the dictaphone, right? The bird?
Dictabird, yes.
Dictabird, yeah.
Yes.
Dictaphone, yeah, it was a bird, right? Yeah. Yeah. Tell us that, share that story with us about Elizabeth Taylor.
Well, the day I was on it, it was a scene where the mother-in-law, Elizabeth Taylor, had been kidnapped.
Right.
She was laying on the living room floor, and she was tied up.
Right.
And the director came in, and he accidentally, when he was giving directions to the cast, stepped on her foot. Well, she squealed, and then, naturally, and then everything was okay, and so she laughed it off, and they went ahead and finished the scene with her tied up. Well, then they broke for lunch, they untied her, let her go, came back an hour later when lunch was over, and she comes in, and she has her leg is this big around, bandaged up, she's on crutches. And, I mean, the director just, boop, 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 he just felt terrible. I mean, Elizabeth Taylor, of all people.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Not just that you broke somebody's foot, but you broke Elizabeth Taylor's foot.
Right.
And then once she made sure that he felt properly small, she started laughing. She was a big prankster.
Right.
And just had a great sense of humor. And so then she unwrapped her leg, and everything was actually fine, but she just had to play that joke. She just...
That's fabulous.
Go,
I mean, the things that you have done in your career. I mean, you can write a book. Is there a book coming out?
People keep telling me to, but it's weird because to me this has just been my life,
right.
And so I'm a behind the scenes person.
Right.
I didn't act. I puppeteered. I suit performed. I built stuff. I was on all this stuff, but I was always behind the camera, right. Not in front of it. So the idea of even interviews like this is very new to me.
Right.
And so I'm having a hard time believing that anybody cares enough to want to listen.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
so now I'm starting to go to conventions, and I'm realizing that there are people out there that want to hear what I have to say. So I don't know, maybe someday, but I wouldn't know how to go about it quite yet. I do write, but not biographical.
Yeah, I love to write. Yeah, I tell you, one of the things that I always tell everybody, I may be in front of the camera, but it's those behind the camera that make me look very, very good. And so you behind the camera make things very good. I noticed one here, Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man had to have been a fun shoot with, was that Redford and Newman, right?
But again,
no, that wasn't Redford. And who was that? It was Redford, wasn't it? And
no, it was.
Am I wrong?
I'm blanking on his name, from Miami Vice.
Oh, Don Johnson.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, but it was Robert Redford.
But actually, I was on second unit, so I never got to meet the cast.
Okay, never got to meet him.
But that one was actually a lot of fun. There was a scene where the villain is getting pushed out the skyscraper window, and you see him, he's spread like this as he's falling down. Well, that villain was that tall. It was a stop-motion miniature.
Oh, yeah.
Because this was before computer graphics
Right.
were going to take over everything, so this was still being done stop-motion. And so I had to make his miniature clothes, and then they had a building that they blew up in the film. And that building was from the floor, about so tall. And so we waited until the middle of the night. It's in North Hollywood. Called the police to make sure they knew there was going to be an explosion. Set it up, and it was filmed in the middle of one of those storage unit warehouse parking lots that I talked about.
Wow.
They just set it up at 2 in the morning in the middle of this parking lot and just blew the thing up.
Wow, that's amazing.
So.
At 2 in the morning.
Right.
Don't make sure the cops are coming. I mean, this is just amazing. Pee-wee's Playhouse. Yeah, you've worked for Paul Rubens and Pee-wee's Playhouse. What did you do on that show?
Billy Baloney. I worked mostly on Billy Baloney, his lovely little plaid sports jacket.
Right.
And then, I was looking through some patterns the other day, and I found patterns for a couple of other things I did on there. And I'm going to have to go look back and see what they were. Because I've done so many little random things where I was having things farmed out to my apartment that weren't when it's 10, 12 hours a day, you remember that. But some of these little things, they were coming through so quick that I honestly don't even remember what the other things were, but I've got patterns for them, so I know I could look it up and see what it was.
Looking at your portfolio, and we're showing pictures of your, it's amazing the work that you've done and how things are done. Have you ever thought about possibly doing, and maybe you have in the past, but a workshop on how to do, to create things?
I have. I've thought about figuring out a few classes around here, if I could figure out what, people want to learn. With the convention circuit, with all the costuming and the cosplay and stuff getting so popular, I'm sure that I could create some kind of workshop that would be able to be enjoyed by art teachers and cosplayers and all sorts of things. But I'm not quite sure what to do with it yet.
Right.
That's actually a whole new world for me. Anything that puts me in front of the people is new.
Right, exactly, yeah.
So I'm having to figure out what to do.
Just have them turn their backs to you, and then that way you can create it. One of the things that when we were looking over your pictures, one of the things that really John was interested in, and he had explained to me about, was the relic. You worked on the relic.
Yes.
Explain that and how that came to be.
That was actually a big career step on that one, because I had sent my resume over to Stan Winston Studios a few times, and I just couldn't even get an interview. My timing was always off, or I was working somewhere else and whatever. And so they called me to see if I would work on the relic, building Cathoga, which is this massive monster that's the size of like a Volkswagen with a tail attached to it. And I wasn't available for a week, and they said, well, we'll wait for you.
Oh, wow.
And they hadn't even seen my portfolio, but apparently enough people had recommended me that they hired me blind.
Right.
And they waited. So I walked in the shop, and they showed me this big fiberglass shell the size of a Volkswagen with a tail attached to it. And they said, this thing is going to be shooting on set in 3 weeks. And it's a suit. It's a man in a suit.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, no, it's a fiberglass shell.
Yeah.
And I said, so where do you want me to start? And they looked at me and they said, well, we were hoping you would tell us. So they basically introduced me to a crew of a few people and said, they're here to help you turn this into a man in a suit in 3 weeks.
So as big as a Volkswagen, you had to fit a man in there, which is okay. But how does he breathe? How does he, I mean, it's amazing, because you got to have all these. A
lot of cutting, joining, everything that my expertise out there, besides the figure finishing and foam sculpting, came down to the fact of anatomy awareness. Right. It's like, it doesn't matter if it's a fake monster, it still has to be jointed and have musculature that we can relate to.
Right.
It doesn't matter how many legs you put on it, it has to be a leg that you can relate to, or it's not believable. So even with that, the fiberglass shell, eventually you have to treat that like it's the skeleton.
Right.
And then do foam muscles, elastic jointing so that it's got tendons and ligaments so that the muscles can move like anatomy. Then the skin goes over it and gets attached to the muscles. So it was all about making things move naturally enough that they were believable.
Wow.
Whether it was a puppet or a suit, it still has to move like something that we can comprehend.
So you have this guy in the suit. I mean, it must take out, because you got to get him out of the suit, get him in the suit.
It is.
So I mean, your job isn't sometimes just to. I mean, you have to daily recreate the same thing over and over again. That has to be kind of real tedious at the same time.
Well, it wasn't, because everything moved so quickly. Oh, okay. And when you'd build these big suits like this, it was more about the heft and the hoist of getting them in and out of these things, Now with Cathoga, we could get him in and out of that suit in 10 minutes. That one wasn't bad. But some of the others would take some time. Now, when I was on Tank Girl, those suits, to get the men in them, I would be pulling so hard, I would be yanking them off their feet. They would see little old me and big old, actor, and I'm like, okay, lean into me as I push your arm into the sleeve. And they would kind of, I would start shoving and about knock them down, and they would realize what it was going to take. And it was like football linebackers going at each other to get them in these suits, because foam latex suits are so skin tight that they suction down. So you are forcing this person in with a little bit of baby powder for lubricant, and by the time they come out, they're so sweaty that suit does not want to come off. You're basically trying to get them out of Chinese finger cuffs,
Wow. Amazing. The half hour's over. Can you believe that? Yeah, the half hour's over. We have to come back and do this again, and maybe you can black my eye and put a little makeup on me and try. We'll go from there. We got to have you come back, Lynette, for part 2 sometime very soon. Maybe part 2. God bless you guys. We'll see you next time on the Spot.